So in reaction to the movement we've seen in the streets for the last month or so, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he's planning to hold a vote for a Republican police reform bill this week, but Democrats may try to block that measure. McConnell has scheduled a procedural vote for tomorrow. He urged Democrats yesterday to allow the bill to advance, but Democrats argue it is inadequate. Republicans need the support of 7 Democrats to begin debating the bill. But a number of them said last night they would not vote to advance the measure, including Senators Dianne Feinstein and Richard Blumenthal. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Mike Braun of Indiana is unveiling a bill today that aims to scale back the Qualified Immunity Act, which shields officers from lawsuits over actions in the line of duty. The proposed bill would instead pull back protections that let officers avoid being held personally liable in legal cases such as excessive use of force and alleged civil rights violations. The move sets up a potential collision with McConnell, who is backing another Republican police reform bill that does not tackle this issue, and President Trump, of course, who opposes reforming qualified immunity. And Senator Mike Braun of Indiana joins us now. Senator, good morning. It's great to have you with us. Explain how far you would like to go in this new proposed legislation in rolling back qualified immunity. And I think it's worth, first of all, defining qualified immunity for our audience, which protects officers from civil lawsuits for their actions in the line of duty. So how would you like to change that?
So I don't want to eliminate it. I want to reform it. And you got to remember that this law originally was established back in 1871, and qualified immunity was no part of it. It evolved through the 60s and then again in the 80s from just cause to clearly established events. What it's done in practicality is just made it almost impossible for any individual whose rights have been trampled upon to find remedies. So I want to make sure that in this moment, Republicans, we oftentimes get behind on the issues. I've cited in our conference discussions, it's analogous to health care. We're here defending pre-existing conditions issue, and I don't know of any Republican now that wouldn't be for it. But if you don't take these moments and do something with them when it's so clear, I just want accountability and transparency, principles that all Republicans, I think, believe in. Make sure that we don't apply them selectively. So this would simply say that your only defense is if there is a law on the books that says the action that you took is okay, or a court ruling says it's okay. If not, you have to have that basic accountability. And Willie, the other thing is for law enforcement, got to be one of the hardest, riskiest jobs out there. When you're being stigmatized by these horrific events like with George Floyd, why wouldn't you want to fix it so the best of what you do comes out and you're not hampered by this?
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, Senator, you've got not only some Republicans on board with you, but some Democrats who say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Are you concerned, though, that Leader McConnell doesn't want to go quite as far, and certainly President Trump doesn't want to touch qualified immunity? So how do you move forward with this?
You know, this is kind of easy for me, Willie, because when I ran my business for 37 years, a state legislator, I tried to go to where I thought you've got a good long-term solution. And in this case, I think we could end up with no Democrats wanting to proceed. So then the bill is dead in the Senate, and there's going to be a vote in the House. But that doesn't mean it's dead in general. That's when I think you'll start seeing more Republicans come out, get out there talking about it, like with what I'm wanting to do, Democrats as well, so that we don't lose this watershed moment and we get something done. So what we see happen tomorrow, I don't think is going to be the end of the story. And if it is, I think it's a mistake where we've lost a moment of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Mike Barnicle.
Senator, policing, of course, is obviously a huge national issue right now. You were a former state legislator in Indiana. So the concept of dealing with police unions, as you know, are very powerful, and they're often very rigid. The Patrolmen's Association, Sergeants Benevolence Association, and they contribute monies to political campaigns, especially at the local level, for state representative or district attorney or mayor. What do you think about the concept of having police unions being forbidden, being banned from contributing to publicly elected officials at a local level?
Well, Mike, that's a good question, and I can tell you for the time I'm going to spend in the Senate, I've got the luxury of really not worrying about calculating a vote on who that contribution might come from or what it might do to get myself reelected. Stage of the game that I got here, I think it'd be better for most of us here where you can put that aside, vote your conscience. Yes, that'll be a real world consideration at the lower level of politics, and especially here, where so often you've got to make that consideration before you maybe actually vote and do what is right. So I think that'll be one of the things. And when it comes to police unions, they generally have backed Democrats over the years, and I don't think I was endorsed by the FOP when I ran back in 2018. But that should be a secondary consideration to the merits of the case. And sadly, it's all too much a part of politics as it exists at the local, state, and national level.
Wes Moore has a question. Wes?
Senator, thank you. And I completely agree that the idea and having the conversation about qualified immunity is incredibly important, because I think one thing we are seeing is the conversation around policing in our society is both about the actions that we're seeing. It's also about the lack of accountability. It's also about the fact that we are watching these incidents happen and there is not any form of accountability for it. And so how do you think ideas and concepts such as things like the civilian review boards and also who becomes accountable during these processes, what role do you think that plays in it? And then also, how do you think the role and the question of the funding issue then plays into how you're thinking about legislative action, both on the federal, but then also on the state and the local level?
So when it comes to any action, I'm cite again Indiana. I introduced healthcare transparency bills as a naive freshman senator in 2015. Didn't get a hearing. I did get a conversation the year I left the state legislature. So I'm hoping that a lot of these reforms well up from the grassroots. And ideally, that's where it should be, because that's where law enforcement is centered. When it comes to funding, I think that funding in almost every case is where the rubber meets the road. And if it's not, you don't put money behind the ideas, you're not going to get a result. So I think in general, this is such a tough issue because, again, I believe law enforcement has a tough job. They risk their life every time they suit up. We need to fix it, though, and I think for their own long-term health, this needs to be addressed at the community level. You need to readjust funding where necessary, if that's the limiting factor. Just don't lose the moment of opportunity. That's here now.
Senator Mike Braun, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.